everyone. I'm Tahir Dhindsa and you're watching TT Digital. This pandemic has battered economy globally and of countries according to their performance against the COVID. Pakistan is one of the country which has managed well, but obviously on the fiscal side it was quite a drain because for the subsistence and during the lockdown, monetary support need to be given to the people, make them stay home and keep the civil society from going to becoming unruly. So obviously it has connotation. Now the International Monetary Fund has decided to give relief to the countries according to their needs. They have decided to give outright support to the debt to some of the countries. And for some of the countries, they are proposing that there should be restructuring of their debt. We have today with us Dr. Abid Suleri, and we are going to ask him where does Pakistan stand on this ladder? Where does Pakistan stand on this ladder?
Well, Tahir, when IMF decides something at a global level, of course, it has to follow a certain framework and a few parameters.
Right.
Now, looking at those parameters and that framework, Pakistan, fortunately, is not heavily indebted countries. Pakistan is not a least developed
Yes.
country. Pakistan is a country with a fairly decent debt to GDP ratio, although we domestically we keep on talking of Pakistan's rising debt, but if you compare it with the total indebtedness, there are countries who have borrowed more than 100% of their GDP, so Pakistan is still not there. So, and fortunately, Pakistan is not among those countries who are severely hit by COVID-19. Although the fourth wave, which is unfolding, that is expected to be slightly more dangerous than the previous three. But Pakistan, fortunately, hasn't seen the rage of COVID-19 as a few other economies they have already seen. So, keeping in mind these parameters and these variables, one can say that this debt relief for Pakistan, I don't see any proposition, any debt relief for Pakistan coming as far as these few parameters are considered.
I've just heard they've increased Pakistan quota on the standard drawing rights. What does it mean?
STR, the statutory drawing rights. So it's not only Pakistan's quota. The developed nations, on the appeal of IMF and G20, they have actually given some of their drawing rights to IMF, which are then recirculated among the member countries, redistributed among member countries, and this is basically that would help Pakistan in applying for a new loan if it wants to, because it would still have drawing rights. So it's not only for Pakistan; it's for almost all.
A couple of more billions have been put into the bucket.
Yes,
for Pakistan.
For Pakistan.
Do you think Pakistan should go and draw that and use it, or Pakistan should keep it at bay to restructure and draw only when it is needed?
Well, right now, things they don't seem to be working for us, especially when it comes to foreign exchange reserves. July's this trade deficit
has swelled down.
that is actually that has exceeded $3 billion.
Right. Yes.
The imports only for July, those were $5.6 billion for the month of July, and if this
July alone,
and if trend goes on, it means we are talking of almost $60 billion plus import, which would be the highest figure of imports for Pakistan. And remittances, one need to see that what would be the trend of remittances. So, in the last fiscal year, remittances was the savior for Pakistan, which have been saving Pakistan from this current account deficit or from
doing too much.
Yeah. But now one has to see that how this trend continues, whether this trade deficit it would keep on swelling up, and if there is a downfall in
So what are
remittances.
the reason? Oil prices and edible or something?
Well, it's not only oil prices and edibles. It's if you
Machinery as well.
yeah. So it's consumer item. It's machinery. It's vaccine. Pakistan is placing order for sugar. Pakistan is placing order for wheat. So there are certain other factors as well. But on one side, it is a good omen for Pakistan's economy, that economy is moving. For FPR, it's a good news because
They will make revenue. Yes.
they will make revenue out of custom duties
Yes.
at the import stage. But for current account side and for foreign exchange reserves,
It's
one
bad.
can already see this pressure coming on Pakistan rupee
on dollar.
versus dollar.
Dollar.
And if this keep on happening, that would mean more current account deficit, and that's where Pakistan requires its program back on track with IMF.
With
So that Pakistan can have a couple of billion dollars as installment from IMF program.
Are you suggesting if it is $60 billion as given the, I mean the trend which has been put up in July, if it is $60 billion, and then 25 billion or 26 billion dollar of exports and 25, so you are suggesting about 10, 11 billion dollar of gap annual. Are you saying that?
But that can be even more.
It can be even more.
If it's $60 billion versus $25 billion, we're talking of $35 billion trade deficit.
Not total, but the remittances would not pull it.
Yeah. So
We need $10 billion about.
yeah. So this requirement that is required, and then the fiscal side of it that is still a separate story.
Yeah.
So I think the sooner we go back
to IMF.
to IMF, either for the current program or for a new program.
What should be the contours of the new program? Just tell us one to because what I understand was the previous program was initial standby support and some structural adjustment. That's all. What should be the contours of the new?
You see, it is about pacing and sequencing.
All right.
So if one looks at the revenue side of it, as I said, that due to increased imports, FPR, they have overachieved their target for the month of July. Almost 30%
Yeah.
more revenue has been collected compared to last year's
This month.
this revenue in July.
Right.
And it is again the highest revenue that FPR has achieved
Ever.
in the first month of any fiscal year. So on fiscal side, things they look quite promising. They have improved the FPR system in a manner. For example, on 30th of June, there was no pending these refunds on sales tax with the FPR, and it was for the first time that FPR didn't get any advance taxes that it used to do on every 30th of June, and they used to then adjust it in the following months. So because there was no advance tax, that's why in July you saw an improved performance as well. So on fiscal side, I think FPR is quite upbeat and quite optimistic about
Right.
achieving its revenue target.
Right.
On structural side, especially on energy side, and that's where I think problem lies now. IMF would like to see OGRA and NAPRA as autonomous, independent regulatory bodies,
Law as well.
which whose recommendation doesn't need a nod from the highest executive, so that it's automatically adjusted. No political government can afford, especially during the times when the energy prices are soaring internationally, to do that sort
Just to pull up.
of
Yes.
step. And I think that is the biggest issue. And the second is on public sector enterprises, especially after Dr. Ishrat Hussein's resignation.
You need privatization.
When he was doing reforms and austerity, not directly privatization, but he was actually
Restructuring and all.
restructuring and all. So I think these two things, those would be the thorny issues.
Need to be tackled. Right. So the crux of this discussion seems to be that on one side, Pakistan is coming on a lot better as far as the internal restructuring is confirmed, and that is shown from the performance of the FBI. After paying the drawbacks and without withholding taxes, they have performed well in the first month of the next fiscal year, which is July, which is unprecedented. But this running of the economic wheel has its connotation on the external end, which is current account and which is going to swell up. So the suggestion seems to be is that the sooner we should go to the IMF program for restructuring, for a restructuring, and even for the balance of payment support, it would be the better. With this, we come to the end of the program, and next time we'll talk on other things as well. Keep watching our programs.